tolerators, this is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie Katona, your weekly look at everyday misogyny. Today we have a celebrity. Today we have Erin Bagwell. Oh my gosh, I wrote my friend's last name in the intro and I'm like, that's not her last name. My friend Erin Bagwell, the Buffalo medium herself from the podcast and the Substack and Under the Moongate. Erin is another joy in my life who was brought to me by the Glamorous Trash Book Club. You'll recognize her from Fixing Famous People, her documentaries, her guest spot on Glamorous Trash. Truly a celebrity. And she's doing me the honor of finally allowing myself to talk about how misogyny affects the craft. And by the craft, I mean the witchcraft, because I've never gotten to do this topic before. Erin, thank you so much.
Yay! Thank you for a beautiful intro. I don't know about celebrity, but I guess on the Fixing Famous People, I'm like a friend of, so I'll take that credit for sure.
Yeah, I think when I'm on Fixing Famous People, like the fixies or the fixers just like brace themselves because I'm so manic and they're like, oh, it's going to be this lady.
I loved your Chris Pratt episode. I thought it was great.
Thank you. Thank you. And you've never watched Charmed. I don't want to blow up your spot right away.
I know. Nat, I was thinking about that actually like minutes before we came here. And I was like, oh God, I haven't watched any. I have no like which media to which into grounding.
Yeah.
And you know, I was thinking about it. I was like, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, like where did it come from in my psyche? I don't know. Yeah, I haven't seen Charmed, haven't seen any of the real witch movies. I've seen Hocus Pocus.
There you go.
That's something. And I've seen the one with crazy that man Nicholas. No, not Nicholas.
Oh.
And Cher and
yes, the Witches of Eastwick.
Yes, thank you. The Witches of Eastwick.
Yes.
Who's that man?
Who is that man?
Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson. He sexually harassed Jennifer Lawrence on a red carpet one day, but she liked it, so it was fine.
Well, didn't he also like get off in a memoir of somebody's by somebody else walking in the bathroom at the Playboy Mansion? Like I have that ingrained in my brain too.
Yeah, I mean he's not someone I'd want to be alone in a room with.
Sure, absolutely.
And
although Cher does have his baby picture from that movie,
I hope she's doing like ritual stuff with it. I hope it's somewhere.
You know, he very famously like turned on her and was like, she's too old to be in this movie. She's a hag. Like, don't have her be in it. She's not sexy enough. And then when they were pretty much like, we're hiring her, like, get over it, he like fell in love with her. And I guess they used to have these really long cast like powwows where they would just like get into it. And Cher and him became like great friends. And she has his baby picture in her bedroom. Weird.
Weird. Also, I tried to read The Witches of Eastwick because my book club picked it one time. And it is the most sickening male gaze bullshit you've like within the first 5 pages. I was like, oh, I cannot. I'm out.
Yeah. Well, they didn't give themselves any favors. They also filmed that movie in the summer, which makes no sense. Like it's all green and summery. Like they very much missed the mark seasonally. So I feel like that screams male gaze to me when you can't get a season right.
Yeah. I am so interested on how you came to witchcraft and how it even entered your psyche, because mine is all pop culture. I wanted to live out practical magic.
Yes.
And then
also haven't seen it.
And it's fine because we're going to fix it one day. I'll fly out and we'll watch it together.
Sounds great.
I wanted to live out practical magic. And also at a low point in my life, I read The Witch of Portobello, which is written by the same guy who wrote The Alchemist. And yeah.
I love The Alchemist.
Yeah. And this woman had such a deep understanding of herself and how she interacted with energy and the earth and people and what she brought to the town and the collective energy or whatever, that I based my entire meditation practice around it.
Perfect.
And then I just started to become a lady who said things like, I have to buy this necklace because the crystal keeps calling me. I
Oh,
have
I'm there, girl. I'm there. I get it.
I have to buy the tarot deck because it keeps ending up in my vision.
Mhm.
Like it's it's coming. It's coming to me. So how did you find your spark?
It's funny. I may not have like had all of the media training perhaps, but I think that and I don't know if my mother would co-sign this, but I think she's a witch. I once went to a bar with her and we were waiting for a table and she like very nonchalantly like said a spell out loud and was like that rhymed about like trying to move us up through the line so we could get a table and then we got a table. Like my mom very much believes in magic like so deeply and I think just growing up with that kind of whimsy like placed that spark in my psyche.
Yeah.
And then, really, I think meditation changed my life when I learned how to meditate because I started to see things in my life happen that had never happened before. And things just felt more in alignment. And I don't know, I feel like it's been a real gateway. Tarot is a huge part of my practice. And, but I will say, I've always done spells with fire. Like, I'm
Oh,
very attracted to fire in, like, the intention setting way, burning things, writing them down, and I've done that my whole life, but I really just recently started to get into more tangible spell work, if you will.
yeah. I would love to be drawn to fire because I love watching fire and I love like my cousin's having a bonfire this weekend and that'll be great.
Mhm.
Me being in charge of the fire freaks me out. Like, oh, I shouldn't. Like,
Mm.
if it's above like a candle burning and the entire time a candle's burning and I'm trying to close my eyes and meditate, I'm also like, is Penelope touching the candle? Is the candle somehow blowing fire into my curtains? Like, what is going
Mm.
on with the candle? So I switched over to water to just not stress myself out anymore.
Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the igniting of it. I think it kinda opens something in me. And I don't have a fear, I don't think, of the burning down of the things,
I mean,
which I probably should more, honestly.
no. I mean, it's probably just something that my meds aren't soothing away the anxiety of. Like, it's my mental illness. It's not something you should
Yeah,
worry about. But
understandable.
yeah, I started doing a lot of moon water, a lot of
Mm.
soaking of my intentions, soaking stuff to cleanse it.
What do you
Yeah.
mean by soaking? Like, are you putting it in a cauldron? Are you in the bathtub? Like, what's
So I don't have a cauldron,
yeah. On
but
my list also, don't have one.
on my list. Have you heard that crystal balls are maybe problematic now? Devastating.
Oh, really? No, tell me.
Well, so I got this information like third hand from Reddit.
Mhm.
Critical Role came out with a spooky game and it's called Candela Obscura and it's a role playing game and one of the characters that you can like build a character out of is a medium or a mystic.
Mhm.
And Spencer said something along the lines of Spencer Stark is the creator of the game, and he at a game master like talk back said something along the lines of when we were developing Candela, it came to our attention that some people might view the way that people depict crystal balls as appropriation of the Romani traveler culture. And, now the G word's a slur and all of it, and like that's evolving. And he said,
Mhm.
however, I do think that there are ways that you can use it that isn't appropriating it. I think it all comes down to like what artwork looks like, and what the woman using the ball looks like. Like, is she in a headscarf? Is she like covered in coins? Is she like Esmeralda just
When
in the
you
whip?
say G word, you mean gypsy?
Yeah.
Got it, got it.
Yeah. 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 And
You know what I just learned about that word? I don't mean to cut you off,
No,
but
you're fine.
that people oh god, I'm gonna get this story wrong. It was basically when a group of people, I can't remember where they're from, let's just say they're from, somewhere in Europe,
Hmm.
moved into, like, Ireland or somewhere else.
Yeah.
People assumed that they were from Egypt, so they called them gypsies. It was like a shorter version of Egyptian,
Yeah.
and that was like the
Did
but because they brought mysticism with them, the word gypsy, kind of like the word witch, then becomes this caricature of a culture
exactly.
and,
Yes.
then thus becomes problematic when you're using it as a slur and things
Yeah.
like that.
So then, like, Spencer was just like, so if you're going to use it in the game, like, make sure that you know how to use it in a very, like, appropriate manner, or you have that discussion with your players or whatever. And then I had to get on Reddit because I was like, when, what? Crystal balls? Because my rule as a white woman is I never get to choose what's problematic. I'm like, okay, if you've said it, it's fine.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. And so it all boils down to the characterization of a spiritual background or an ethnic group or whatever. In Dayton, there's a really great cemetery. And yeah, I, what a thing to say. There's a really great cemetery to go walking around.
Mhm.
And Paul Lawrence Dunbar is buried there. The Wright brothers are buried there.
Hmm.
But I would go and I would pay homage to Queen Matilda because she's buried there in Dayton,
Wow,
Ohio.
cool.
Yeah. So I would
That's
leave like
amazing.
coins and
Mhm.
intentions and like just like talk to her for a little bit and just be like, "What's up, girl? It's me, your girl. And I'm just leaving you some trinkets because you like trinkets, and I'll be on my way." And I used to
I love
leave,
that.
and there was a little boy who was buried there with his dog because his dog tried to save him from the flood drowning.
Oh,
And so on the crypt is the statue of the dog, and I used to leave the dog treats.
oh, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
just something fun to do on my lovely walk around the cemetery.
I'm with you. I think cemeteries can be so beautiful. And I don't feel a lot of I mean, there's energy there, obviously, but most of it I feel like is of people who are grieving,
Hmm.
leave behind a lot of energy. But I find them to be so peaceful and so beautiful and such a nice I don't know. I feel like we don't do a lot of remembering. So
Yeah,
it's nice to have like a physical space for
it's a
that.
very settled energy. Like, it's not real amped. It's not really
Mhm.
anxiety inducing. It's, settled because what settles you more than death? I don't know. Just,
During the pandemic, when we couldn't really walk around too much, I was in Brooklyn with my daughter, who was about 1.5 at the time. And the playgrounds were closed, and one of the only public spaces we could really get to from where our apartment was the cemetery.
mhm.
And so we used to have these really long, winding. I mean, this was a giant cemetery. It had a fish pond, it had a Japanese garden. I mean, it was absolutely manicured to the hilt. It was gorgeous. But I have such visceral memories of just like walking around this cemetery and
Yeah.
hanging out and having nowhere else to really go.
Well, when I was trying to find my grandmother and my grandfather's grave one time, my sister had just been with my mom, and that's why I went because I was feeling petty that they went without me because I was like, maybe I have things to tattle to grandma about
Mm,
you guys because
sure.
you guys can't act right. So I went to do that by myself. And I texted my sister. I was like, hey, how's the easiest way to find like grandma and grandpa? And she went, creepy Jesus. And I went, no, I just passed creepy Jesus. And she goes, no, no, not creepy Jesus at dinner. Jesus whose eyes follow you around the park. And I knew exactly where that was because I
Oh.
remembered it as a kid.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yikes.
But you had asked me what do I do with water, and then we went off
Yes.
along the way. So I usually just use bowls that I have
Mhm.
like special connections to, or like little spell jars if I'm going to keep it on my
Yeah.
altar. and I just write out my intentions, and then I just like submerge them in the water, and I let the water wash away the ink and kind of like immortalize them in the energy. And then if I'm really good and organized, I throw the water out in the like earth, like
Yeah.
just to further ground it. And if not, I just pour it down a drain.
You ever freeze anybody?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um, I'm very lucky.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You got some people in your freezer?
Yeah. That was one of the first spells that I ever did. And to people who don't
Yeah.
know, you can write someone's full ass name on a piece of paper and then put it in a baggie and freeze that baggie full of water in your fridge, and they're not allowed to bother you or your energy anymore until you thaw them out. Yeah.
Indeed.
It was it was a woman who I couldn't be friends with anymore because she had a lot of transphobic ideals, and she was trying to be like, I'm just trying to be like realistic about grammar and what my daughter is going to grow up knowing is true. And I was like, okay, I'm done here. Like, I
Yeah.
literally
Bye,
left her
J.K.
home.
Rowling.
Yes, I
Yeah.
just made my exit. I was like an aunt to her baby. I was like, we were like, our lives were pretty ingrained. And I was like, and I'm done.
Bummer.
I can't. It's a bummer. It's a bummer when people are secretly transphobic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what I do with the water. And it gives me the same because I used to try with the fire because to me that's more permanent because it actually burns into
Mm.
the ether. But it still gives me the same result of like that.
Yeah, there's no rules. Whatever resonates, whatever feels good, whatever speaks to you.
When you were, because I have kind of gotten this cool seat to your like real calling to not only practice witchcraft, but to do it out loud, like on the
Mm.
internet
Yeah.
and with other people. When you decided that this was going to be something that you committed uh, to, was there something specific you were like looking for? Since there are no
Mm.
rules and we just get to pick and choose what we do.
What a great question. I mean, I think I was looking for myself. I think so much of my spiritual journey is about remembering who I am and honoring my past lives. And I definitely know that I was burned at one point, and I have felt it in a past life regression. And I have a deep commitment to my previous self of being able to use my voice. And I will be honest, I was really, really scared to come out and to talk about my mediumship and my, dabbling into witchcraft and learning about it for my new documentary. And I had to really reckon with this feeling of not being safe and being safe at the same time, and really understanding what it means to me. And unfortunately, I'm a person that really finds that when I find the truth of something that I can't let it go.
Me
And
too.
so it really like consumes my identity in a way, and I have to fully step into it. Because if not, I feel engulfed by shame, and then that triggers my depression. And it's just the way I'm wired, that I like to live out loud and I like to just be able to be free.
Yeah. I think so much of what you're saying is things that I felt decentering misogyny and men from my life, where it's like I finally get to connect to myself. I get to understand myself better. I get to live a truth that is mine. And I think what's so cool is you are in a position where that's all happening through the craft. For me, it like just happened out of like anger and spite, and witchcraft came way before that.
Yeah.
But when I was building a practice, it was because I wanted to be the one who was in charge of what spirituality looked like to me.
Mm.
And
Yes.
I was done teaching I used to teach at a Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
And Mass during May used to bum me out because May is the month of Mary, and, like, the way we talk about Mary bums me out because
Totally.
it's just telling, like, little girls that, like, if you're perfect and virginal, that, like, you'll get whatever you wanted, and God knows
And
what.
there's no stories about Mary. I'm a recovering Catholic as well. There's no stories about Mary. Mary has no stories except for her, pregnancy, and she barely is even in that one,
And in my mind, Mary's the coolest, like, bitch of all because, like, she got herself into a real tight spot, probably not by her own choice, and came up with, like, the coolest gotcha story ever. I was like, "An angel did this. An angel, I promise. It was an angel."
She was an angel.
It was an angel. God, it's like I'm baiting myself for, like, bad reviews for people to be like, "She literally called Mary a liar." But, like, no one's lied to get themselves out of something. Like, it was either lie
But
or get.
listen, angels were, and I believe in angels now, but angels were a very powerful, thing to call upon. Joan of Arc, same story. She said, the angels, they were talking to me in the garden, and now I got to go like take over France. Like,
Yeah,
this
and
is, I've been told the message, and you guys get out of my way. Like, we got to go.
well, so one of my very first ever witchy stories, I think I told you when we were in Nashville, when I foresaw that my aunt was going to have not only a boy, but a very cranky boy, like a very
Mm.
grouchy boy, and she should name him Oscar the Grouch. And my cousin had a lot of colic as a baby, so he was always screaming and
Mm.
always angry. And I was like, "Oh, looked like someone was right, grouchy baby." And my great aunts literally being like to my grandmother, "Peggy, the angels are talking to her." And my grandma and my mom being like, "Way to get your aunts all worked up." I'm like 3. Why are you getting your aunts all worked up?
It's funny how we define these things, right? It's like,
Yeah.
sure, why? Some people call it spirit, some people call it angels, some people call it,
Listen,
who knows what. It's
and I have the double whammy, like the double, almost like authority because I'm born on Christmas. So they're like, Jesus and the
Mm.
angels are talking to Natalie, our Christmas baby, our baby who was born when Jesus was born.
Yeah, there you go.
And what I found out later in life from a friend was solstice babies. So I'm born during the winter solstice, usually lend themselves to psychic moments and mediumship and
Mm.
being able to foretell and foresee the future.
Yeah, I think everybody has the ability. It's just whether or not they want to step into it and explore it and practice it and be open to it. And
Yeah. And yeah, so when I was building my practice, it was because I was like, I'm so sick of religion with men and the male gaze in religion and what they've decided is cool.
for sure.
And you and I have the same really heavy book about the entire history of women being in the center of spirituality and how ancient cultures used to practice spirituality through women.
Hmm.
And it was colonization that ruined it. And I just wanted to get back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it is bizarre to grow up as a woman, and I feel like you're preaching my story too, like to grow up and just feel like, where are the women? Like, where are the deities and where are the leaders? And it felt to me, and I think also because I'm kind of an ambitious person, when you sit in the church and you see all these men running things, you're like, well, where is my place?
Yeah.
And I just never felt really comfortable. I could tell some Catholic school horror stories as well of just like feeling not included and looked down upon and underestimated. And one of the things that I've been really pondering, so I'm making this movie called The Resurrection of the Witch, and one of the things that I'm really interested in is how we get back to our divinity.
Yes.
Because if men get to look at Jesus and God as a he, how does that enhance, the privilege of their spiritual development? What do we get?
Yeah.
We get to be the mother, we get to be the sinner, we get to be the prostitute. There aren't a lot of places for us. So I'm so curious about how we can give women access to divinity and what that
Mhm.
would feel like.
And I think that was also as I started to actually like talk to other people about the craft and get resources and actually get beyond the Sandra Bullock of it all of just being like, I want to live by the sea and I want Stalker Channing to make me midnight margaritas and they be magical.
Mhm.
I want to be Agatha all along. But when I started looking into it, but yeah, it was getting women to feel empowered in their own selves because
Mm.
so much about our culture and our society post colonialism and post capitalism being real chill is that women are so disempowered in our society. And I grew up watching a lot of powerful women take back power in their lives through
Mm.
things like sarcasm and doing things on their own and independence and kind of doing like, you know, maybe not so great secret things to get back their power. Like, I'm going to get mine at the end of the
Yeah.
day. And I was a kid who like loved the Anne Boleyn story and the Ava Perón story and these stories about women who took a hold of their sexuality and then weaponized it against nations. Again, like Anne Boleyn was literally like, and now we don't like the Pope because you want to have sex with me. And King Henry VIII was like, yeah. And then like sometimes Anne Boleyn is one of my deities. Like I'm like, she is one of the most powerful witches ever.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of so many successful political movements based on women who just do sex strikes.
Yes.
And nations and towns and countries come together and they say, okay, enough is enough. If XYZ doesn't happen, we will not have sex with you. And they're extremely effective.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had, Kimmy K's number. I could call her up and say, babe, we could get so much done. Like cut them off for a month and see what happens. The nation would crumble.
Yes. Well, have you heard of the 4B movement? Are you on that side of TikTok?
No, what is this?
The 4B movement, I believe, I'm not going to get the country right. I think it's an Asian country, but all of the women, or a good portion of them, just unincluded men from everything. They just moved away from men. They stopped
Wow.
sleeping with men. They stopped raising children with men. They stopped talking to men, listening to men. They were literally like, we deserve a life without men.
Wow.
And and because TikTok is a thing, now women over here.
Are like, oh shit, we got to get our communities together.
Yeah, and I was like, because my friend Annie, who's on the podcast a lot, she and I talk about it all the time about like when we get our fellow women who are done and we go and we live in the woods with our cow and our goat, but we each have a cow and a goat because we don't want to share and we want two goats and two cows. And like it's just us and women and maybe Wi-Fi. Like it's something that I truly crave because when you are in a society that is just built of women for women, you get like it's that safety net that you were talking
Mm.
about where you just get to feel safe. I don't know how to get this across to the men in my life about why we feel so unsafe in our culture.
My husband walks into the room sometimes and I scream,
Oh my gosh.
like constantly.
And he's a nice one.
Yeah, and he's we've been
Yeah.
together for 10 years. This man's not a stranger, but there's and he's always like, "It's me. You're like it's a big joke in our family, but like as a woman, if you see somebody and it's a man energetically, you can sense
Yes.
somebody coming into your house that's a man. I mean, he came home from band practice the other day and I like dived behind the couch. Like it's a weird
Yeah.
part of our bodies that do even, amongst those we love and know won't harm us. We have a physical reaction sometimes to,
Yeah.
the safety of men. There's
I
a good Instagram video of another wife like screaming at her husband. I'll try to find it and send it
please
to you. Great.
please send it to me because I mean it's so true because again, it's not it's not you personally that's making me afraid. It's literally the history of violence against women. Like it
Yeah.
I don't get the like I don't get the sweet release of just going, ah, and today I can go to Target and be 100% safe. It's not my reality.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've been walking home and like just started running because I was like, I don't know, that guy's like kind of behind me and I don't know. And I'm just gonna run. Like,
And you know what? I'm just going to run. I stopped going to the grocery store after dark because I didn't like loading
mm,
groceries in my car and have to have my back to like a majority of the parking lot or truly
yeah.
like anyone.
Yeah.
And my aunt was flabbergasted when I told her that and she goes, "I've never thought of it that way." And I was like, "I think about women's safety all the time. Just
Hmm.
all the time." And then like it compounds into trans women safety, fellow queer women's safety, non-binary people's safety. Like it's always something that I am constantly just weighed down by, and I don't know how to stop it. And I think sometimes that like the morning pages I do as my like daily meditation just helps me get it out. And once it's
Mm,
out, it doesn't get to have like a hold or a power over me. So that's
yeah.
how the craft and artist way and things like that have started to help me be more one with an energy I should deserve space in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I made a joke. Well, I used to tell this to my cat openly. I used to tell her all the time. I used to be like, "Penelope, that's why we'll never live with a man and there will be no men in this home." And then we moved in with my dad, who has the
Mm,
misfortune of being a man,
yeah.
and Penelope won't look at him like I broke a
She's
promise.
been conditioned.
Like she's like, "You told me this wasn't something we were going to do."
Yeah.
And
It's complicated.
the energy is bad here. And I was like, yeah, I know. It's fine. Like, it's fine. But I, yeah, let me look at my, oh, we were going to talk about depictions of witches just across the
Mm,
board
yeah.
and how the new, the like new trendy way to talk about the Salem witch trials is they didn't burn witches, they burned women.
Yes.
And it's very powerful to say that, but it also kind of like wipes out my history. But also, maybe they got one witch in their rounding up of the witches or whatever, but it was literally just, I mean, what we're doing now in covens and meditation circles and yoga classes and things, women gathering.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the crazy thing about Salem, and I haven't been before, but it's so interesting the history of that it leaves such a mark in the United States because it was only a couple of dozen women,
right,
that were, I believe, hung or drowned. They didn't burn women in the United States.
right,
And it was over 100,000 women in Europe. I mean, communities, towns. I mean, people were wiped out. And the jarring thing is, I think to your point about being a community, it's like you could accuse anybody.
right,
Like there was no tangible, evidence or information. It was like that person looked at me the wrong way. And as we know from structures of power, it was such an easy thing to abuse, these marginalized women in the community. And one of the interesting things about the visual depiction is women who used to run breweries. So women did all like the cooking and the things like that. Do you know the story about the alewives?
no, tell me the story.
So it's really interesting. So, women were in charge of all the herbs and all the spices and all the kitchen stuff. Well, they were the ones that brewed beer. And oftentimes, if you were a single woman and you brewed beer, you could make an income off of it.
Oh,
So these brewers, these women would wear these big hats that we would know as a witch hat, And oftentimes if were brewing beer and you had a lot of oats and things like that, um, you'd have a cat because the mice would come and you'd have a lot of, stuff you needed to protect. So like, but it's interesting that that's linked to financial independence for women. And that's like one of the first depictions of like, we know women to be familiars with cats and like
Mm-hmm.
these women who lived on their own, who
Yes.
had cats, who wore these hats, who were these brewmasters. Like that's one of our kind of ideation places for things we know about the witch. And there's so many different visual depictions, I will say, throughout media. The other one that I will just nerd out about is for The Wizard of Oz, Pam Grossman shares that, the only reason they painted her skin green was because it was one of the first Technicolor films. And so they wanted pink, they wanted green, but like that doesn't exist anywhere in history, anywhere else, the fact that women had these green faces. So I think that's fascinating because that's something that we just clung onto, right? And we're like, this is it. This is the vision of the witch.
Yeah, because after Wizard of Oz, it was the teacher from the Black Lagoon kind of has like a green, that's a kid's book from like the kids of Beverly Elementary or something. It's a book I read in elementary school, but like she has a green tinge.
Yeah, and
to
it
her
became a part
skin.
of our culture. I mean, it's one of the
Yeah.
most famous movies in the world. So,
Yeah.
but we also forget that Galinda was a witch, which is also kind of interesting, right?
Right. Because she's a hero. And listen, the Wicked Witch of the West, which thank God for Wicked, because then it gave us like a little vindication and justice for her story. She's literally just pissed off because a house fell on her sister. Like she's grieving. Give her a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Give
Yeah.
her a moment.
Give her a moment. They melted her in her grief.
Yeah, I'd be pissed if somebody smashed a house on my sister. I'd be a bitch too.
And then stole her fancy shoes.
Yeah. An heirloom, a family heirloom of all things.
Family heirloom. I mean, and you're right. We don't often, we call her like Galinda the Good, but
she's the good witch. Yeah.
Yeah. But we very rarely even extend it to Galinda the Good Witch. And one of the
she gives a lot of fairy energy too.
She does.
Yeah.
And one of her first lines to Dorothy is, "Are you a good witch or a bad witch?"
I know. It's interesting. We just clung to the bad.
Yes.
Bad.
Well, and I think that's it too, because one of my running jokes is like, I'll say, "Hey, I haven't dabbled in the dark for a while, but every once in a while it still calls. So if you want me to curse his name, one time I got an ex's cat to run away from his house and a girl to break up with him all in one chant."
Wow.
I know. I got the news while I was out of town. Like I had burned pictures of him. I had put on Fleetwood Mac and Stevie Nicks. I had cussed out his entire name. And the next day, his cat and his girlfriend were like, "We're sick of you." And I was like, "I did that."
Wow.
Wow.
That's a way to do it.
Yeah. So every once in a while, I try not to curse people because, walk in the light or whatever. But sometimes the dark side does have cookies.
I'm really interested in like exploring my shadow work for sure and getting right with my dark side. But it's funny because I'm a Scorpio rising. I feel like I put so much of my dark out already.
Oh.
I never really, I don't have to dig far. Do you know what I mean? I'm very attracted to darkness in the way that I think culturally we're like afraid to talk about anything bad.
Yeah. Sometimes I view this podcast as a lot of my shadow work just because of how much comes up that was like either dark in my life or dark in a guest's life or dark about the world at large. And it does make me like, I've had to sit with women and walk through that moment where it's like, I thought everything was fine. But you turned that sentence on me. And it's happened to me too, where I've told a story and someone's like, in 2024, we call that grooming. And then you have to sit there and be like,
yeah,
"Oh, that is what it is. Okay. All right." And So yeah, a lot of just, and I'm sure it comes up in your work too, but just talking to people and hearing the things that they've gone through and the shame that's put, because I think that part of it is too is witchcraft gave me a reason to feel powerful.
I was just thinking the same thing, that it's kind of this beautiful gateway when you do feel, underestimated or unseen or unsafe, to get back power, and to not only get back power, but to like stand in the presence of something that some people are afraid of.
Mhm.
That some people to this day, like when you say it, it sends a shiver up their spine. And I think there's something really cool about women occupying that space, because it's so, I don't want to say that power is foreign to us, but it's not something that's so easily given. And being
Exactly.
and doing the craft is something you have to take.
Mhm. And it's something that even if you're not recognizing it, if you have it in you, it draws itself to you.
Mm.
My sister has recently found out that you can just get rocks off the internet and they're pretty. Uh,
You can get rocks in your own backyard too.
listen,
You should
I
see me out digging out there and like going on nature walks and
do you have a
I mean,
tumbler? Oh, you
no.
need to get a tumbler because they get prettier. That's my favorite part of TikTok is watching people tumble rocks.
Oh shit. Yeah. Okay. All
There's
right. Add to cart. Add to cart. A
there's like
cauldron and a tumbler. I know what
a
my Christmas list is gonna be.
oh, I asked for, yeah, I have one in a box somewhere around here. They're loud, so you have to figure
Mm,
out a way to not let it be loud because you have to
okay.
run them for days on end. And
Oh
I
wow.
hadn't figured that out yet. But this summer or this winter, it's just gonna be rock tumbling all day, every day.
You know what I've been into is flower pressing.
Oh, I saw that on your story today. I love the secret language of flowers, that's how people
Mm.
used to communicate feelings and messages and things like that, just like a little sneaky witchcraft language of flowers. I used to press a lot of flowers too. I don't get that many flowers anymore, but I used to press them.
But tell me about your sister. She's on the internet. She's buying
She's on the
crystals.
internet. She's on Etsy. She's like, they'll send you any rock that's pretty. And I was at her house one day and she had her little silver dish full of rocks and she had to make a point of being like, I don't think that they have power like you think that they have power. Like I don't think they do anything. I just like to hold them and look at them and then I feel better. And I went, okay, but that's it. that, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like that is what it is. And she goes, no. And I'm like, okay.
I have the embarrassing story of my daughter getting off the school bus. And sometimes when my daughter gets nervous, I'll give her a rock to put in her backpack to like take along with her. She came out of the school bus and she had a rock or something from her that she just had in the backpack. She gives it to her friend. She goes, now, if you want to set your intention or your wish, you have to wash the rock. Go home, wash the rock. Like she's giving her like this tutorial. And the dad is standing there and I'm standing there and I'm like, and he's like, they learn the weirdest things at school.
And you're like, yes. Yeah.
I'm like, as the neighborhood witch, sure, it came from our public school system to learn how to set an intention with a rock. Yep.
I love that she had the whole like the tutorial down. She's like, you wash the rock.
She's like, you got to cleanse it. It's got my energy on it. You got to take it home. And
the the times that I'll just tell people like, oh, you can get a quartz and cleanse that right out of your house. And they'll look at me. I'm like, just cleanse it. I go, clapping your hands. I go, if you're just feeling icky and you're like, the energy is icky here, like, ugh, oppressive, just start clapping your hands. It breaks up whatever's haunting you. Like, and they're like,
Mm.
oh,
You know what
okay.
I learned that's really good is if you pretend that you have like a vacuum suction cup and
Hmm.
you just do your whole body with the vacuum,
Oh,
it is like life changing. And then you can like unplug it and like send the energy back into the earth or like do whatever you want with it. But it is like, to sit there and like you feel so clear afterwards. That's a fun one.
I also think that the cool thing about empowering yourself through witchcraft, it's an excuse to feel powerful in a place where you might feel disenfranchised or disempowered, but it's also like an excuse to love yourself because so
Mm.
Like, think of apothecary work. It's all, like, really nice teas and lotions and balms and, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, just put a little witch hazel behind your temple or your ear so your headaches go away," or whatever. It's literally just the act of self-care.
Mm, I love that. Well, spirituality, I was thinking about this actually because I'm trying to write the film right now, so I'm thinking a lot of like big plot points and things like that. But I was thinking about, we hear a lot on Chelsea's podcast, Glamorous Trash, about, Joseph Campbell's, big hero's journey, blah, blah, blah. And I think the interesting thing about spirituality and witchcraft is like, and this is not a brand new concept, but I'm stealing it anyway. It's not about going out, it's about going in.
Yeah.
Like the hero's journey for witches, for spirituality, for spiritualism is going inside, is finding the journey and the adventure within. Like, and that feels very revolutionary. That feels really interesting and exciting and very feminine too.
Yeah, and if you think about it, because, like, think of the hero's journey, the most of the time when you're studying the quote unquote hero's journey, you're using the Odyssey. Like, even
Mhm.
or you're watching that one Bluey episode where Bingo has to go on a walk. My sister uses it in her English class. She's like, the hero's journey. Every woman that was a threat to Odysseus was a witch. And it makes me feel like women who live in their own truth, in their own power, or whatever, they're not villains. They're just a threat to the systems that men are trying to put
Mm.
into place.
Yeah.
So, like, of course, they were the villains of Odysseus or whatever. They were women who did not need him and did not want him and could just use him and leave him and turn him on his way. And so often men are used to being like catered to and talked up and all of it. So when it's like when I find that journey within, and if I'm so busy focusing in on myself, our society isn't set up for men to know how to handle that. So they were like, and that's why
Mm.
witches are bad.
Well, also the financial component to it. I mean, the first healers and the doctors and the women in the woods that you'd go to if you had a problem, were witches. And when the Catholic Church was established, I mean, they outlawed it because they were like, we don't want you getting their money. Like, you need to come to the church. You need to come to church. You need to absolve from sin. Like, you need to pay us. We'll make it better. You can atone here. They distinctly wanted to split the capitalism from women being able to be financially independent.
Oh my gosh. So the other night at D&D, I didn't watch my mouth and we were in like a creepy little room that had like little relics, like little creepy relics. And she described each one. And someone was like, this is just like a lot. And I was like, man, those Catholics, because like Catholics love witchcraft because they have their little trinkets and
Catholics do love
they
witchcraft,
love
yes.
witchcraft. They love to turn
They
water
love
into wine.
frankincense. They love myrrh. They're spreading the incense all around. They're lighting candles.
Yeah, they got different metals for different purposes. They love to like help you set an intention through prayer or whatever. The Catholics, they love witchcraft.
Mhm.
And so I just said it like, I was like, damn those Catholics without explaining that I myself am a recovering Catholic. And I just said it like it's a appropriate joke to say to a bunch of people that you have played an hour's worth of a game with and have never met before. And they let it slide. So if anyone was offended, they didn't put anything in a chat or anything. But I did think to myself, I was like, you can't just be dogging Catholics and the fact that they stole your people's entire like game. But every Catholic church has like a saint finger. Like that's weird. Why are you keeping a
A
saint's
saint
finger?
figure.
Or like a clipping of hair? Did you not know this? That in a church, in every church, there's like a
In the
hidden part.
tabernacle, yeah.
Yeah. There's like a
Well, they can't build a church without the blessing of a saint or something, like a
yeah.
physical artifact, right?
So like a finger, a toenail, like something. That's witchcraft. I also think how funny it is when so right now, I don't know if you noticed, but in our country, we're on the cusp of women even losing more agency. I don't know if you know. I don't know if you
I haven't noticed, to be honest, but
I
wow, I'm disappointed to hear it.
right, and on the TikTok shop right now, is a T-shirt, and I get a video for it all the time, and it's herbs, and it's all the herbs that medicine women and witches used to use to either perform abortions or to prevent pregnancies in general,
Oh, wow.
and I was like, "Oh, because we'll always find a way." Like, I am a big proponent of poisoning violent men. I'm like, just a little cherry pit. You just crush it up. Enough cherry pits, you crush it up, and they're not a problem anymore. They're not a problem. Like, Julia has
Yeah,
begged me to stop saying that on the internet. She goes, "You have to stop telling people that cherry pits make cyanide, and then that solves your problems because someone's gonna do it, and then I think you're liable for that."
I mean, information is information. It's interesting though, actually. So I am a developing medium, and I study a lot at Lilydale, and it's actually it's illegal in New York for mediums to give health advice on the body. And there's still like rules and regulations around herbalism and things like that where people are it's interesting, like when you watch Tyler Henry's show on Netflix, which I love, and he talks about the body or something going on with your health, or your ancestor says, check in on this. Like, it's interesting. Some states still have really regulated, and obviously I'm not a doctor, but if I'm getting a message, I'm going to share it with you if I think it's applicable to your well-being and
Oh,
your best self.
yeah, and as a hypochondriac, my best friend has begged me to stop meditating because she was like, "You're one person who doesn't need to be in tune with your body because then you're like, my gas has shifted to the right side of my body. What do you think that is?" And I'm just like,
Mm,
"That's where it got trapped. I don't know." She's like, "You're too attuned." Most people are
yeah.
just like, "Ooh, my tummy hurts a little bit." And you're like, "It's moved to the north quadrant of my abdomen. And do you think I have this?" And it's like, "No, I just really think you
Mm.
need to take a gas X."
Yeah, we get all kinds of messages, don't we?
Don't we? Like, but yeah, that's interesting. It boggles my mind because of states' rights, what's illegal and what isn't.
Totally. Yeah.
Because when I moved back here, I found out that sex work is still illegal in Chicago. And I went, but it's a big city. For me, that was the qualifier. I was like, but it's a city. Like,
Yeah, of course.
and and the internet was like, still illegal though. And I was like, how do they combat that with the internet? I wonder. And
Yeah.
well,
Well, I mean, men can get away with things that they want to get away with.
they truly can. Because here's my whole thing. Like, if a man is getting a tummy tonic from a witch, he's like, this is wonderful. But if a woman is getting something that gives her agency, they're like, bad, illegal. And it's the same with sex work. They just don't want women to
Mm,
have avenues. They want a thing. Like, they're like, I should be able to see your boobs whenever I want. But then if I get something out of that, they're like, absolutely not. That's almost like you have power.
right. Giving autonomy.
Yeah. It's wild. Wild.
It's a wild world.
Oh my gosh. We talked about Mary, but we didn't talk about our other lady, Mary Magdalene, and how they just cut everything about her out of the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, the one of the most interesting things about Mary Magdalene is that her gospel was the most popular gospel of all time. So it was the most copied. So in order for you to like get a gospel at that time, it would have to be copied by hand. And hers was the most copied because as she writes in it that she was Jesus's favorite apostle. And it's so fascinating that they decided to not include it for obvious reasons, but there's so much. And the other thing that's really fascinating, I think, about her gospel is there's like 7 pages that are missing right up in the beginning that no one has been able to find. And there's kind of like rumors that maybe the Vatican has it, because Coptics might have. I mean, there's like little like theories about if these pages exist, but they're gone in all the copies. So whoever had the original didn't want this information to come out. And I have a theory that one of the stories of one of Mary's most Mary Magdalene's most famous stories is when she sees Jesus in front of the tomb, right? When he has resurrected. Well, she writes in the, or as we know from the other fella's gospels, her recollection of it, that she did not see him in the flesh. She saw him in her mind's eye. She didn't
Mm.
recognize him at first, but she could feel him like a medium, and she could sense him, and she could communicate with him. And she was able to, say, like, he's still with us, he's risen, yada, yada. And I have a deep, 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 I mean, knowing, feeling that the beginning of her gospel is about connecting to your psychic abilities, about connecting to your ability to connect with spirit or your ancestors or your guides, that she had written in the very beginning. This is how I connect with him. This is how you can connect with him. That's my
Oh, I love that
little theory.
because most other people would go the other route where it's like those 7 pages are about her marriage and feigning Jesus or whatever, because that's what people actually like. A
Yeah,
lot
and
of
I
people.
think all that's true too. I think for sure that's part of her narrative and part of what made her, important to him. But I think, yeah, I think that they truly didn't want to give people power and autonomy to go within, to have the power within. They wanted to make the church an external force that could heal you instead of you healing yourself.
Well, because what also drew me to witchcraft is it's so not disorganized, but like with organized religion, I have to do like I can't eat meat for spring. And for witchcraft, I just get to be like, and today Athena is talking to me, and therefore I will fight all of my battles in her name.
Mm.
And like there's autonomy and there's choice. And the thing about Catholics is the last thing they want you to do is to think deeply about any of it. Like, because it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Like, don't look behind the curtain because then stuff doesn't make sense. So if Mary Magdalene was trying to teach people to be like, what if you sat and thought for a moment? They were probably like, absolutely not. Sit quietly with your thoughts? Nah,
Well, I think
no.
that's one of the weirdest things about my development as a medium is like you think, and maybe I'm simplifying this too much, but you think it's a lot more extravagant than it is.
Hmm.
My meditation practice is how I connect to dead people. And the only way I know that I truly am connecting is because I get validation from other people. So when I get messages about people's ancestors and loved ones, I have no idea what any of it means. I write it all down, I automatic write. But truly, I think if somebody was to meditate and listen, they would just be able to say, oh, it's just my imagination, or it's just me remembering that person's, how they smell or that thing that they loved. And they dismiss it. And I feel like part of my journey has been, there have been a lot of moments in my life where I've been like, oh, that's nothing. I thought I saw my grandfather. That wasn't him. It was just a shadow. Those kind of moments. And it's like, no, actually, like if we allow ourselves to believe, there's a lot more here that we can explore.
Well, I'm currently living on a haunted floor of a house, and she's really been quiet since I've settled and like put stuff here. It's almost like she's real chill with me. But
Mm,
usually when I'm visiting, she pounds up and down the wall just to be like, hey, girl, it's just me. And my sister's always like, I think it's just raccoons in the attic. And I was like, I don't think so. I think it's just like a lady who
mhm,
also just wants to hang out. And maybe she's not hanging out with me anymore. Maybe Penelope keeps her really entertained. Who knows?
mm,
Sometimes cats do that. But it's usually because the first time I noticed that I could feel people that weren't supposed to be in the room with me anymore was after a cousin died, and I couldn't stop smelling my grandmother's cigarette smoke.
mm, mhm.
Hmm. And now it manifests in other ways too. Like I'll get a deep, deep need for a cherry cordial, and like
What's a
no,
cherry cordial?
it's like, oh, it's a real disgusting candy that people hand out during
Never heard
Christmas,
of it.
but I love them. They're,
Mm.
maraschino cherries.
Yeah.
So it's a maraschino cherry with like all of its juices. And then around the juices and the cherry is like cream mixing in with the juices. And then it's chocolate coated.
Mm.
Around Christmas time, you should be able to find them in most Targets and or grocery stores.
All right. I'll keep my eyes open.
They are a traditionally Christmas candy. They made cherry cordial Hershey Kisses that
Mm.
I think they put out for Christmas too now, and they're very good. But they're disgusting candy. No one in my family likes them but me and my dead grandmother. But every once in a while, I'll just be
Mm.
like sitting or walking through a store and I'll just be like, I wonder if they have cherry cordials. And I get really hyper focused on food cravings. So like once it's in my brain, I'm like, you have to eat that thing or else it's not going away. Like
Mhm.
like during my cycle, I'll get like ravenous for a cheeseburger and I'm like, I need it,
Mm.
but it has to be like a good cheeseburger. It can't just be like
Yeah.
trash. It has to be like a Five Guys thick cheeseburger. I call it my friend and I used to call it like our bleeding cheeseburger or whatever. Like you gotta go get your bleeding burger. It's probably because I'm low on iron,
Yeah. Your
but
body knows what it needs.
my body knows. And so, yeah, it's her cigarette smoke. Penelope's meowed at her picture a couple of times, and that weirded me out. I was like, stop.
Mm.
Grandma didn't like cats. You have to stop. And I think my mom told me once, she was like, your grandma didn't like cats, but your grandpa did.
Mm.
And I didn't get to meet my grandpa. He died when my mom was 16. So I I had a really great uncle who was the happiest person to ever run into me and would like weep with joy at the mere sight of any of us kids.
Mm.
And I told his daughter at my uncle's funeral, I was like, sometimes I just really do feel like Uncle Choke just comes to check in to let me know that he's still just like weeping and proud of me. Like, just, I think that's why I cry now when I'm just like so weirdly proud of someone.
Mm.
It happened at Young Frankenstein over the weekend. We went to the musical Young Frankenstein, and part of the musical is the monster gets to do a tap number, and then he
Mm.
gets to very proudly sing Putting on the Ritz in his Frankenstein voice. And I'm like, I'm in the front row and I'm about to burst into tears because this
Mm.
man who's acting like a monster who does not have a brain, like, is getting to tap dance. And I'm like, that's beautiful.
Aw.
It was really the only part of the musical I liked. Because the rest of it is just like dick and tit jokes, but that was beautiful.
They got something right.
I got something right. Is there any other thing we can think of about how witchcraft became kind of a feminist movement and a way to buck misogyny? How do you feel about men who practice? Like, I just want to know as like friends. We don't have it like we can pretend the mics aren't here, but like,
Yeah, it's so interesting because as you asked me, I could kind of see I know your
you,
thought about
you're like,
it where you want to be alone in the woods. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. I
Um,
don't want them anywhere near me.
how do I feel about them practicing? I don't know if I have an answer to that. What I would what's interesting is what you said something really profound at the beginning of our conversation about appropriation that was like,
Mhm.
as a white woman, like if you tell me
Yeah.
this is bad or whatever, like I believe you, like you're the authority.
Hmm.
And I think when it comes to spiritualism and witchcraft, I do like the respect of being the authority.
Yes.
And I like men who understand the goddess era,
I love that.
who understand the history of the deep knowing,
Hmm.
and maybe who've witnessed a woman give birth. Because I think when you kind of break the world down simply,
Hmm.
men are able to understand their place in it.
Hmm. And that's why
And
they're so angry.
But like I went to Lilydale recently. I'm very close to Lilydale. I'm about an hour away.
Mhm.
It's a town of mystics and psychics, and you must come. And I
I
must do
have
a
to come.
cookie. I must do a cookie like tour, grand tour of it, and the
Yes.
whole thing, and all of that. But there's not really a lot of men there. Sometimes people will bring their partners, or sometimes there's a rogue man. And I ended up going with a couple of friends, and one of them was a man, and he was like walking around Lilydale, and he was like, "This is really cool. Like, there's no men here. Like, this feels really energetically different and interesting." And he's like, I'm open and I'm available to whatever this is of being the minority here. And I think there's a tenderness that needs to go into practicing witchcraft, especially because the history of it is that women specifically were punished for it and were burned for it. And I think if men can hold space for that and have reverence for that, then I welcome them to do what they want to do. There's no rules in magic is what I always come back to.
Um, as I ask that really inappropriate question, like, men, Aaron, should they be allowed in our club? It hit
I
me.
understand though why you want to protect it.
Yes.
I understand.
It did hit me that most of my tarot practice, when it was shared with another person, it was me and a man going back and forth. It would be me reading
Mm,
my own tarot, sending it to him with no context, him
mhm,
telling me what he got out of the reading, and us
mhm.
comparing what I got to what he got. And like we would do that back and forth. And it
I
was a
love
way
that.
that our friendship that had to become a little long distance, like it's how we kept it up. And so it's funny that I'm like, get out of my club, don't touch my rocks. But I was like, wait, you did have a male partner in your craft for a while, Natalie.
Yeah, and I would also say, like, we're talking specifically about, like, hetero,
Yes.
straight white men, like, queer men, trans like,
He was a
join
queer
like
man.
like, come
See?
to the table, like, you
Yeah.
bring all of your, things. I think, we're specifically talking about
Yeah.
on the unfortunate souls that are straight white men.
Yeah. I mean, when my sister got all of her rocks, I was like, don't let men touch them. And she's like, what does that mean? I was like, I it's my superstition. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. I
Well,
don't
you know
know.
what? I think what you're intuiting is that our world is so out of balance
Mhm.
that there is such a heavy, attention and money and catering to the masculine energy
Yes.
that we are in need, desperate need of rebalancing the scales and retipping and repouring all of our energy and our wisdom and our spiritual selves into the feminine. So I totally understand the feeling of wanting to protect it.
Well, we do have a closing ceremony onto all the men I've tolerated before, which you'll love
Hmm.
because it's a lesson and a manifestation. What is the biggest thing you've learned about combating misogyny or yourself or anything when it comes to witchcraft that you would like to pass on to the listeners?
So many things are coming to mind. Um, is something that just popped into my head is the star of the pentagram.
Mhm.
I thought was a satanic symbol. I grew up thinking that it was like, oh, that's the symbol of the devil.
Yeah.
And I did not realize that it represented the four elements and then spirit above. And now I have one in my office. And I think there's so much about history that once we start digging a little deeper, we realize that there's more than one answer to something. And I would say to people, the biggest thing I've learned probably is just trusting your own instincts when it comes to your magic and figuring out what works best for you. And I think it's great to pick up witchcraft books and spell books and flip through them. But I think, as you so beautifully described, like, I'm a little bit more into fire and you're a little bit more into water. And, things are going to speak to you in different ways. We didn't dive into it, but I would consider myself like a green garden witch. Like, that's where I find a lot of magic. But trust the process of magic unfolding and just have fun with it.
I love to buy a witchcraft book because it has a cool cover and then never
Of
open it.
course, of course.
Why would I open it and actually read up on something when I know everything, uh, all the time? Like, I read The Great Cosmic Mother just to get mad that
Mm,
spirituality was ripped from women.
mhm.
I think that was my biggest lesson of all when it came to, like, the craft and understanding the history behind the craft and, like, the generational trauma that's held
Mm,
within witchcraft
yeah.
is that it wa it was at some point all at our fingertips and it was stolen from us.
Mm,
Like, that's what happened, and they still try to steal it from us because of all of the ways that they demonize it and convince you that it's Satan and legislate it and all of it.
yeah. It's interesting because I feel like so much of it is kind of counterintuitive in the movement. It's like I'm no longer interested in educating or bringing along men to my journey. And my sole mission now with the work I create is to uplift and empower women because I feel like when we step into our power, then everything will change. And I think they'll come along for the ride and they'll come to Lilydale and they'll, be open and groovy if that suits them. But like, I think I actually think, and I'm not being facetious here, I think it I think it's paramount to the continuation of the world
Yeah,
that women step into their power. And if we don't, I think that there are gonna be big cosmic repercussions.
right, because I don't think what we called it the divine feminine, but we didn't, like, define it for ourselves, but to me, it's like women hold all of the empathy and the care
Mm.
of the world. Like, would we be in such a drastic climate crisis if women were still in charge? There's just a bigger picture that we see.
Yeah, and I think being rooted in the community in a way too. I think that through childbearing, I think is really inexplicably linked too with the way women view the world and
Mhm.
how money can go to schools and childcare and parental leave and having kind of more of a family um sensibility. And I just read something that said millennial men are three times spend three times the time that their father spent with them, with their children.
Yeah.
So we're, again, we're getting there and the ball is moving and things are going, but we need women so desperately to enact and to activate and to reawaken and to remember all of their gifts.
Yeah. What is a manifestation that you would like to add into the collective energy about the things that we talked about today?
I would love for our listeners to step deeper into their knowing and to their wild sense of trusting themselves, and may we all continue to unravel and to dive deeper into the goddesses and the divine creatures that we are and that we continue to celebrate them.
I love that. I think mine is going to be that I hope that whatever is keeping the listeners or myself or you in shame or guilt or secrecy or whatever,
Mm.
it eventually we wake up in a world where there are less things to feel shame about.
Mm.
Because, I mean, because I revel in being the rebel daughter who's weird and the weird, funky aunt, I know that you had a very different experience about stepping out into your craft and being public about it. Like, you were more fearful, and I didn't know how to support you because I was like, I just showed up with rocks. And I was like, I do this now.
Yeah.
And I just gaslit my whole family into believing I had been doing it all along, like I did with my sexuality, where I was like, I date women now. And they're like, okay. And I was like, yes. And I've always dated women. And they're like, that's not true, but okay. Like, yeah. So I just hope that whatever is holding someone back for living their most authentic divine power and truth. Just you wake up one day and you realize it's not worth it. It's not worth the
Mm,
hold that it has on you.
yeah. And
Like,
that there's a freedom on the other side of it, a joy.
well, Erin, the tangents and the time that this took to get recorded just means that we need to do this more often.
This is fabulous. I had so much fun diving into all of the witchy things with you.
I was so happy when you said yes. And thank you so much for being here. Make sure everyone knows where to find you because I want everyone supporting the Under the Moon Gate. I always want to call it the Buffalo Medium Show because that's what we call you. And I'm like, no, it has a name. We helped name it.
Yeah, I'm at Substack at underthemoongate.substack.com. You can Google the podcast on Spotify or on Apple. You can just Google Under the Moon Gate with Erin Bagwell. And mostly I do most of my living my life through Instagram. So if that speaks to you, you can find me there as well.
Yeah. It'll all be linked in the show notes. And you can find us at Men I've Tolerated Pod on Instagram, Natalie K124 just for me on Instagram and or TikTok. And to all the men I've tolerated before on Patreon, where you'll find all of the secrets I cut out of this. And remember, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything you're tolerating, including the continual need and pressure to feel ashamed of something that you feel called to do and makes you feel powerful. Smiles are for joy.